Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining us on our little corner of the internet on National Fitness Day. We're really delighted to be joined by Emma Kirk-Odunubi, who, if you know anything about Emma, she is super qualified to talk to us about all things fitness. So welcome to our little corner of the internet, Emma. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
No worries. So if you don't know, Emma is incredibly qualified and a really incredible runner in her own right. Emma is a level 4 strength and conditioning coach. I have to read it off a list. There are so many things to say. She's a Track Life London coach, an Under Armour runner, a sports scientist, and a gait analyst. So we're going to be talking to Emma tonight about anything from entry-level fitness, how to stay fit during your running, regardless of the distance you're going, and a little bit about footwear as well, because that's Emma's love language. So do you want to kick us off a little bit, Emma, and just let us know, your history of running, how you got into it, why you started, why you do it?
So I think my first initial kind of foray into running was when I was a kid at school. So I remember being kind of 4 years old, first few days at primary school, and remember seeing there was a cross country club and was like, I want to do it. And at the time they had a limit of being 7 years old to do the cross country club. So I was really annoyed by that. And that was kind of my first realization that, I wanted to run, and that was something I was excited by. As a kid, obviously, someone growing up who loves sport, the Olympic Games was a huge inspiration for me, kind of seeing the likes of Kelly Holmes and those kind of people kind of as I was growing up was a massive inspiration as well. And I was that kid that did all the sports. So from football to hockey to tennis to table tennis to cross country running, like I tried it all basically just because I loved being active and loved moving. And then I think running specifically came back to me kind of during probably my uni years. And then when I left uni, it actually kind of the main focus came from the loss of my dad when I was 19. And it kind of shook my world. And I found that running was the way that I kind of coped with that. So I used to run to get headspace, for mental clarity, and then obviously I already knew that there were the benefits of it, and then the community aspect that it brought, and then that helped me almost overcome my grief initially. And then obviously the love of running then continued, and the challenges, and here, there and everywhere. And yeah, it kind of grew from there. And also in my job as well, it was kind of a big focus since I left uni. So yes, definitely been a major part of my life thus far.
And what kind of running do you do? Are you into the really long distances, or do you prefer the shorter distances?
I think nothing does beat like a 200-meter sprint. I'm not gonna lie, 100, 200, just that feeling, short and sharp. But if I have to be honest, my favorite distance is probably around kind of the 10-mile mark. There's not many of those races. I've done the Great South Run a couple of times, which say is the standout for me as that 10-mile distance. But it's not as much of that push for the half where you're kind of like final 3 miles of this sucks or it's not as kind of short and high intensity of the 10k. So for me, that 10 miler is that kind of perfect distance. But in saying that, I can never deny I love the journey of a marathon, like that journey of the training plan, going through it, getting to race day, and then that succeeding once you cross the line. So yeah, both of those if I'd had to pick.
Okay, and what you obviously do quite a lot of running coaching, and one thing we found at the National Running Show is that we've been contacted by a lot of new runners. A lot of people used lockdown to use their one bit of exercise a day to actually get out there and take a few steps, and we had a lot of people contacting us about Couch to 5k and just sort of sharing their success stories. So it being National Fitness Day, I just wondered if you had any advice for people who want to start or have just started. And I know you work a lot in the strength and conditioning side of things, and I think that there's often quite a lot of confusion about, okay, well, if I want to run, don't I just run, or shall I, how do you get started in all of this and keep it as simple as possible? What would your advice be?
Yeah, definitely. I totally agree in terms of the fact that there's so much information out there. And when you start, as I say, Couch to 5k is an awesome place to begin. It's really gentle, steady build for your body. And I think that for me, that's the biggest thing to say to any beginner. Kind of don't go out there and try and run 30 minutes straight away, because it's just going to potentially injure you and also just make you hate the experience. So build slowly. Doesn't matter how fast, there's no race to build up to be running strong, whatever that is. So just take it easy, take it steady, and try not to compare your start point to anyone else's. I think comparison is a massive thing that we do all the time anyway, but especially in running, if you're like, oh, well, she started 4 weeks ago and is doing this now, and I started 6 weeks ago and I can barely do X. So for me, I always say to people, try not to compare. And then with regards, you're saying, to kind of strength and conditioning, I say find one thing, make one little change weekly, and then that can help. So a classic one I give to pretty much every runner is some single leg balance work. So when you're brushing your teeth morning and evening, stand on one leg. Simple as that. You'll work the little balance muscles, intrinsic muscles in the feet. It's a bit of fun. If you've got kids, you can do it as a family, and you can all be standing on one leg and all that kind of thing. And it will just help to strengthen your body. And that's a really simple thing that you can add in and go, right, I'm going to do the couch to 5K. I'm going to make sure I can try and balance on one leg each evening.
So when you're putting your training plans together, do you tend to focus more on time running than distance run, or does it change depending on the goal?
I would say it depends on the goal, and also, if I'm honest, the ability level of the people that I coach. So I would say, actually, if I'm honest, 90% of people that I coach, I will give them a time frame. And especially when it comes to a beginner, time is, for me, more important than distance, because I think you will negatively judge yourself if you go, oh, I didn't do 5K, or I can't reach 5K. When instead, if you go, right, I want you to run for 5 minutes. It doesn't matter how far you get, you're running for that set time. And it doesn't matter if there's a person who can run further in that 5 minutes or someone else who can run shorter in that 5 minutes. You still both run 5 minutes. So I think it's, for me, with the plans that I create as well, like I will always give time frames until you get to that point where, okay, if that person is kind of more elite, so you're talking your sub 3:30, sub 4 hour runners for marathons and sub 3, then you're going to kind of make it more time specific, so it's catered more for them. But yeah, for me, I'm a big fan of time.
And you're an avid CrossFitter, which I find fascinating. I'm too terrified to walk into a CrossFit gym, but you know, I follow you on Instagram, as many people do, and you talk a lot about sort of understanding the fundamentals and getting form right. What advice would you give people who, like me, who we just go out and run, you pull your trainers on, you head out the door, you don't give much consideration to how your feet are landing and the position your arms are in or anything like that? How would you advise people to just get those fundamentals right, from both the strength and conditioning side of things and from the running side of things?
Definitely. I think for me, a key thing, and it's kind of a tongue-in-cheek saying, but it's like trying to run before you can walk. So if you're trying to get your body to do a certain time goal, say you've set yourself, or a certain distance goal, but you haven't got the strength to be able to do a simple body weight squat or things like that, you haven't nailed your basic strength components, then your body is either going to suffer when you're trying to hit those bigger goals, or you're going to injure, because your body will always find the path of least resistance. So if it's easier for you to move in a certain way to be able to try and get forwards, your body will do that without you even realizing it. And that's where some of us will get those injuries, those compensations, because the body won't just stop. It won't just go, oh, actually, I can't do that, I'm just going to stop running. Sometimes it does, if it comes to kind of lung capacity and things like that. But when it comes to mechanics, your body will just find a way to move to get to that end goal. So that's why, for me, strength training is so important. And as you were saying, CrossFit can be intimidating, 100%. I think it's just, even the word CrossFit sounds like, oh, CrossFitness, quite intimidating. But the way that I try and explain it to people is it's gaining your fitness in a different sense. So for example, as you'll see, a lot of runners will do swimming because it's a way to swim without, or get the aerobic fitness without putting impact through the joints. And there are similar things within CrossFit that I give my clients. So I'll say, look, I want us to work our lungs and work our aerobic capacity, but not actually put so much stress of the impact on the ground. So it may be simple things like body weight squats into using a rowing machine for a little bit into something else and just doing that on rotation for 15-20 minutes. It can be things as simple as that don't technically have to have that CrossFit terminology. It's just making sure that you're working your body's aerobic engine in a different way than pounding the ground. So I think that's a really important thing runners need to understand, that it's not necessarily just I must run constantly all the time. And don't get me wrong, the elites will do, but don't forget they're conditioned to do that. They've done that strength and conditioning probably throughout their lives. If they've gone up the levels, your Kipchogis of the world will still lift weights, your Mo Farahs of the world will still lift weights, but yes, they're doing 100-mile weeks, 120-mile weeks because their bodies can. So yeah, dialing it back in terms of for a beginner, just think about different ways that you can build your aerobic, your lung capacity, and that will definitely help you. It doesn't always have to be pounding that road, basically.
I think that's the misconception, isn't it? And I'm guilty of it as well. I'm not running at the moment because I've got an injury in my foot, and I think it is that thing where you think, well, if I'm not running, I'm not getting better at running. So I have to be out there every night if I want to get better at running. I have to actually be clocking up those miles in the week. But it's really interesting to hear that actually doing things like swimming or doing things like strength and conditioning, you can still be working your aerobic side of things as well, and actually increasing your fitness, and ultimately that's only going to help your running.
Definitely. And I think one thing that we found obviously through this year and having lockdown and all these different changes that's going on in the country, I think having a little bit more time on our hands, because we're not going out in the evenings or we're not going to X and Y, being able to go, okay, right, I know where I have this weakness, say it's foot, say it's ankle. You now have potentially that spare 10 minutes that you weren't doing when you were doing a commute. So now you gain that time back. It's worth putting in those little changes and working on your little weaknesses, so that when, say, you are injured and you can come back to running, actually, I've nailed my basics, I've nailed everything else. So now when I go out on the road, I'm even stronger to do what I love, which is just running. And that's a classic thing I hear from people going, oh, I hate strength and conditioning, I just want to run. Okay, but if you just want to run and constantly run, do the cheeky little S&C work so that you can constantly run. So it's that little balance there, definitely, I think people need to understand is really going to help them.
Awesome. And obviously you're a run coach. I just wondered if you could give people a bit of an understanding of what that means. I think a lot of people will think, oh, coaches are for the elite runners. Is that correct? Is that incorrect? How do you work with your clients?
So for me, being a run coach just means someone who is taking the stress or the weight off of that person to help them get better. So for example, I have clients who are still trying to run fast 5Ks, their first 5K, and they're like, I want to build up to that. And then I have the other end of the spectrum where I have clients who want to hit sub 3-hour marathons. So it's having someone to take that I suppose pressure and goal of you trying to get there off your hands. You don't have to think about it, because that's what we're here for. We know the science, we understand how to kind of make you stronger, how to build you up to be able to achieve those things. So definitely, if you're someone who has a goal in mind, be that distance, be that even just general fitness and getting fitter, then having a coach to do that will take stress out of your time thinking, oh, wait, how am I going to do that? What should I do? Why should I do that? We can just set that up for you. And I think, as you said, it's super important. It's not just for the elite, it's for anyone who has a goal, who wants to achieve it, really. I mean, I used myself as a guinea pig when I was learning and kind of tested things on myself and said, okay, how did that plan work? Oh, I felt that here, maybe that was too much. And so I've done all that testing and trying on myself. So it'll take that out of you doing it, and then potentially falling up injured and things like that as well. And I think as a coach also, it doesn't necessarily always mean that it's going to do this in terms of how you succeed. As you say, everyone gets niggles or injury or life gets in the way, right? So we can then adapt training programs and plans to help with that little upward trajectory. So yeah, basically it just helps take, I say, stress out of you trying to achieve that goal.
And I think quite often we know what we want to achieve, but for a lot of people, they won't know how the best way to get somewhere. And you can buy yourself a gym membership and walk into the gym and aimlessly walk around and lift a few weights, but without the plan in place, actually you're not moving closer towards fulfilling that goal. So I guess that's where the coaching comes in, and you've got that motivation for those dip days where you just think, oh, I just don't want to do it, or it's raining, and
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
it's dark, any excuse. And obviously you've got some people don't have access to coaching. You have a lot of content on your website that you share as well, and on your Instagram. Do you want to just talk people through sort of how you use that platform and how you motivate and, you know, educate runners through that?
Yeah, certainly. So the main page that I use is through Instagram, and if I'm honest, a lot of it is directed by other people. So people will say to me, drop me a message in my inbox and say, hey, I've been suffering from this, not really sure how to move forwards with it. And again, classically, I always say to people, everyone's different, and I don't know your anatomy or how your body functions, but I can always give generalized advice from my previous experience working with injured runners and analyzing people's gait. So that's where kind of the initial idea came from, and realized actually people don't know the stuff that they need to, the basics to help themselves. And kind of the key thing that I believe in is helping and empowering people. So no matter what I'm doing, I want to empower them with knowledge. And if they have that knowledge, then they can help themselves be their best. So I will do things, for example, on running form. So I've done many posts on cadence, about foot turnover, and about how you can do little tweaks to help yours. Done things on injury through shins, little tips and tricks that you can help kind of try and avoid shin splints, which is a classic thing, especially for new runners that really suffer. So a lot of my content that I created, especially through lockdown, was all to do around kind of key injuries, key niggle points, and also then the simple things such as like warming up. We always hear people going, right, go, make sure you warm up before you run. And everyone's like, jog on the spot? Like, what is that? So
a bit more.
Yeah, exactly. Like, what do I do? Like, if it's outside, I'm already warm, like all that kind of stuff. So I definitely tried to put more simple things like that out there so people actually understand how to do a warm up. If you don't have time, what are the key things to focus on? So a lot of it, if I'm honest, is directed by people messaging me and asking me. And I really like to do, so on Tuesdays, I like to do a thing called Trainer Tuesday. I say linked to my background in trainers. So I do say a review of certain footwear or some tips and tricks about footwear and how it works and how kind of it's important for you to know certain things about it. And then what I've now started doing is also doing like a Q&A on my social media. So if people have questions, I'll put a question box up at the start of the morning. And then by the evening, I'll go through all those questions, and kind of people then send me more questions and that kind of thing. So it's people have told me it's a very useful thing to be able to have, because even if I answered a question before and they forget the answer, I can re-answer that and have all that information there. So yeah, ultimately I want my social to be something informative that you feel like you can learn from and put it in practice. As you said, if you can't afford a coach or can't afford things, something that's a bit more generalized that can still massively help you.
That's awesome. I mean, I go there often, and I've got lots of tips from you. So thank you for sharing all of that information. You are really knowledgeable about running footwear, and it's really interesting chatting to you about the gait analysis side of things and understanding what you need. Can you give people a little bit of advice about, you know, if they are, you know, starting out or struggling with their footwear, you know, what advice can you give them as someone who spent a lot of years reviewing and analyzing these footwears and the different ways that different people run? You know, what advice can you give for getting the right pair of shoes for you?
So for me, the biggest one outright is put the decision or the bulk of the decision in someone else's hands. Go to someone who has that knowledge, that has that background. Go to independent running stores. For me, are going to be one of the best. One, because they're independents and they need the support of all of us runners, and it's where I started out back when I was 14, 15 on a Saturday job. So they're where the houses of knowledge are. They have all the multiple brands. The brands then come into those stores and inform them of how their footwear works. Many, I'd say at least 95% of these stores nowadays will have some form of analysis, some gait analysis. A lot of them also free if you make the shoe purchase as well. So putting that in someone else's hands, who, as you said, has been doing it and that is literally their job to understand footwear, should definitely make you feel more comfortable. So especially if you're fully a beginner, having someone to take that stress away will make a massive difference. And then once you go through that process, usually, which is what I used to say, once you've gone through it, you then have to focus on comfort. And that's the only thing you have to focus on. Many studies have actually been done. A podiatrist that I used to work with actually did one of his studies on if comfort is a big factor for footwear fitting. And ultimately, after analysis with someone, comfort is one of the key things. So if you are very lost, you can't do anything, can't find things, comfort is a massive factor as well. But it sadly is more complicated than that. But yeah, I would say putting it in someone else's hands generally is the number one piece of advice. Over the last maybe 4 or 5 years, the industry has sort of changed from the traditional supportive shoes versus neutral shoes, and we've kind of got this, which in my opinion is better, this kind of middle ground category where we're looking at more guidance style footwear, where we're using one type of cushioning to help the foot rather than before, which supportive shoes used to be, as kind of 2 different types, one with a little bit more of like a wedge or a block as such to stop that rotation in movement, which is where people classically kind of overpronate was the term given. That term is kind of it is disappearing now. It's just the degree to which pronation occurs is probably used more, or well, in my vocabulary is used more now. So yes, it can be very difficult to navigate that. So to save you, either go to a specialist. Also, there are podiatrists out there who understand gait training. There are some physios who have specific gait training as well. So don't rule those out. Go searching for those kind of the sports medicine people as well. They're going to have that specific gait training. So if you really are suffering, podiatrists, all that jazz is definitely that avenue to go down. Yeah, that would be my key advice, really.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. That's really helpful. I'm going to have a little flick through Facebook and pull up any questions that people have left. Do you want to just talk a little bit about what goals you're working towards at the moment, and, you know, how you set your goals? And because obviously, you know, you're a very accomplished runner, but I guess we're always raising the bar for ourselves. So it'd be really interesting to hear.
Yeah, definitely. So at the minute, I say, because of I actually during lockdown injured myself, actually broke my ankle. So I was out from running for 8 weeks or so. So for me, I then transitioned a little bit more focus onto my lifting, my weightlifting, because it was a little bit less kind of constant impact on the foot. So for me, I've kind of got some strength goals going on at the moment. Next couple of weeks, going to be testing that. And then looking on to the end of the year, I'm going to be doing a charity event, raising money for cancer research in a couple of weeks, which will involve some running. And then looking onward to next year, when races, fingers crossed, toes crossed, will start to go ahead again. Definitely, I do want to complete another marathon. And on my to-do list is definitely the ultra. I've definitely and analyze many gaits of runners who do these longer distances, and I'm chomping at the bit to find the right timing, as I say, around my kind of strength lifting training stuff to fully commit to the longer distance. But I do really want to do it because I love being the outdoors, and the adventure side of kind of ultras and trail running really intrigues me. So I think that's my next kind of goal for 2021, is to go down the ultra route.
Well, good luck. That you've got quite a few goals there, and quite big ones as well. You're not setting them small.
Just, you know, minor ultra marathons is fine.
Just a quick ultra. One question we've got is, what are your top tips for getting back to running after an injury?
Yeah, this is a very good question. It's one that I got injured in lockdown, and it's one that you struggle with. Obviously mentally is a massive one, because I know a lot of people that do run do it for the escape. They do it for kind of end of work, run out the door, just go and get some headspace. And for me, that was a big one to start with. And then what I ended up doing was channeling that need and want to get running again straight away, with weighing up with, okay, if I go out and run too early, am I going to make this injury worse? And you have to kind of sit with yourself and go, I know I really want to, but actually is holding myself back and going, right, if I can nail my rehab, if I send that focus, instead of being on the running, send it on the rehab, on the working small little things, the little details, but finding maybe some space to do that so you can still get headspace. So whether it's even just in the gym, sitting on the gym floor, just because you're in a different space, that can help you get clarity as well. But yeah, massively for me, focus on doing the rehab well and don't go back too soon. I hold my hands up. I've made that mistake many times. I've gone back too soon. Then I've got a niggle elsewhere because I haven't worked on what's already kind of still recovering. So you've always just got to focus on what is important now, because say, excuse the pun, but in the long run, if you don't work on what the short stuff now, that problem could be there 6 months, a year later, and then you could be down the line and kind of not be running for a very long time. So yeah, focus on the present and the now and what you can control, and try and do that well.
Thank you. That's really good advice, and I'm going to try and take it myself. Amanda's asked, I have a problem with night vision. Even with a powerful head torch, I stiffen up. Would she avoid it or confront it? And if so, any tips?
And that's a really difficult one as well. Kind of night stuff, definitely I'd say, obviously, if you've got a good torch anyway, that's something to investigate. Even look at kind of different blogs, different people, search for just general runners' advice through blogs. There's so many great ones out there. And reviews as well, because if you can then find a light that works for you, then that's ideal. And if it really is kind of causing you to have too much tension because the angst of running at night, then potentially find another way, or find more lit roads if possible. Obviously, if you live out in the countryside, that can be difficult, but finding routes that are a little bit more lit will obviously make that slightly easier. But yeah, it can be a super tough one. And yeah, I've done runs in the past where you literally can't see anything, and it does send a lot of fear through you. So yeah, I totally understand that. And yeah, do search for some lights if you can. Trying to off the top of my head think of brands, but they're not coming to me right now. But yeah, just do research and get it from blogs, I'd say, of runners.
Brilliant, thank you. Pat has asked, easiest way to improve pace.
So for me, I always kind of like to think about whole part whole. That makes sense. So whole being you just constantly running. Then part, which is break that running down. So go for, say for example, you want to run a fast 5K. A classic one that I give and that I actually put into a speed program I created is break that 5K down into 1K blocks. So week 1, do 3 1Ks with 3 minutes full rest in between, and work on the consistency of that. Then as week progresses, you then end up with up to say 6 or 7 1K repetitions with that 3 minutes rest. And then when you then come back to that retesting and trying that 5K again, or that certain distance again, your body is already working at that higher interval pace. So by working intervals basically is the best way to help improve your constant pace. So to run a 5K fast, don't constantly run a 5K. Break it down, do shorter intervals, and then with those intervals over time, bring that rest down as well. So it's almost as if you are constantly running, and then do that retest. So yeah, that's definitely something for me. Anything where you're wanting to improve speed, bring it back, do the interval work, and then try and test the whole thing again.
Brilliant, thank you, Emma. Mike says, Mike from the running show says, I carry a lot of tension in my shoulders over long distances. Any tips?
Yeah, it's a massive one that I see from a lot of runners, and something that I experienced when I ran my first marathon as well. What happens is, because we get fatigued and we get tired, instead of our breathing coming more from kind of our stomach and breathing through there, we end up breathing through our upper ribs. And so you get a lot of tension doing this. And if you think, say, if you're doing it on a long run, especially, that's going to cause a lot of fatigue and tension through that area. So I always try and say to people, if you hit, say, that next run marker or that next minute and you can feel the fatigue in your legs, just think about pulling your shoulders away from your ears. It's a massive one that I give as a cue when I'm coaching track, because when you start to do those sprint intervals, or when you're going towards that end, everyone starts to do this and you can't run relaxed here. So thinking about shoulders down and breathing more through your stomach rather than breathing up through the top of your chest is a massive one for me. So yeah, I'd say try and go away and do that. Think about kind of your breathing in terms of where you're breathing and how controlled it is.
Perfect, thank you. And in terms of heart rate, do you encourage people to keep track of their heart rate and work at different sort of percentages with your maximum heart rate for improving fitness? What's your advice on that?
Definitely, I think it's a very good tool, and I know a lot of other running coaches that, especially with like towards their elite athletes, or even not even elite athletes, they still work with heart rate. And for me, I've been working with it on my own, on myself, and kind of playing around with that, and definitely noticing some of the benefits, especially of running at that lower heart rate level. So you've technically got 4, 5 in some people's eyes heart rate zones, and being in sort of the lower zones, we're talking 60 to 70% of your maximal rate, and running consistent, steady and long at that pace is very advantageous to building your aerobic capacity, your ability to sustain longer work, longer running. So for me, it's something that I play around with, but I know obviously, especially because beginner runners are going to be like, heart rate, what? I now have to think about that. It can be very intimidating to even contemplate it, let alone talk about it. So I don't talk about it too much, but I do have the questions here and there. And certainly if people that I coach ask me about it, it's definitely something I like to put in there. But having that variation is key. You can do that steady state stuff, but you still need to, as I was saying before, do the intervals where you get those heart rate spikes to be able to work that, kind of push that threshold of your sort of top pace as well. So for me, heart rate is a really good one to work with, and there's definitely a lot of evidence behind it as well in terms of in research papers and science. So yeah, heart rate is a really good one. It's one I definitely suggest if you're someone who's a runner, definitely that kind of intermediate level, who's like, where could I next go? What could I next do to help myself? Definitely worth researching. And if you are tracking heart rate, don't get me wrong, watches and devices are great, but probably the most accurate that you as a runner can get is going to be a heart rate strap. Just because it's probably the closest you're going to have to your accurate heart rate. So I definitely say if you're really kind of focused on working there, do get a heart rate belt.
Okay, but for beginners, don't worry about it.
Don't worry about it. No, you're still going to be pretty accurate through a watch. It is, but if you want to be kind of the gold standard as such, then yeah, look towards that heart rate belt.
Okay, the last question we've got is from James. I have reasonable short but quick stride. Any tips in getting quicker, better running style?
Yeah, so this is where for me it's probably the annoying answer. Everyone's different. So in terms of when it comes to stride length, it can have a big variation on height, in terms of how long your stride should be. And then the magic word cadence, which is definitely banded around in the running industry a lot, and especially in form, is also one. So cadence is simply the turnover of your foot. So if your foot turnover is very high, you can be exerting a lot of energy, but not necessarily enough to give you that extra force. But then if you're having a low cadence and you're kind of almost plodding along, you're going to be putting more stress through the body, not able to generate as much force to move you forwards. So yeah, if we're turning our feet over really quick and are unsure whether we're able to do that, track it. Use different apps that you can do that, watches, all the stats, Garmin's, all that thing. You can see your breakdown of your cadence. You can see how things have worked. I definitely know that with Map My Run, you can use, it can actually work out your stride length as well based on your foot strike position. So that can be really useful to look at. But I think just look back at data, I would say, is going to be the best thing for them to do, and see where you're at. And then once you see what your average is, if you feel like you're working too hard, think about just changing something small. And a one that I really like to give people is, if you're worried about your cadence or where it is, see where it is now. If you want to improve it or think it's too much or too little, just take off 5% or add on 5%. And it's where I like to type in playlist into Google and go, okay, I want to run a cadence of 170 beats per minute or steps per minute. You can then find songs and playlists linked to that, so that if you do listen to music when you run, you just have to run on the beat. So simplifying things like that will help. But I'd say probably the ultimate answer, if I'm being pedantic, is get a gait analysis. Get someone to properly have a look at what's going on, see where you think your stride is too long, too short, and that will then give you some more in-depth answers for sure.
Thank you. Okay, we had one last one come in. So any tips running on rough terrain on the forest?
Yes, so I would say rough terrain one is awesome for lower leg and ankle strength. So any runner even who runs on the road who wants to help improve their ankle strength, running on uneven terrain can actually be a real benefit. Secondly, back to footwear. Footwear is going to be a key one here. So checking the different treads. If it's uneven but not too muddy, then you're probably going to want to go for something that's maybe a little bit softer, just to go with kind of rocks and things like that, but that has quite a good grip. Or if you're down that other end where it's quite muddy, quite boggy, something a little bit stiffer with a little bit extra lugs through the base of the shoe is going to help you have a little bit more grip. But I'd say, yeah, if you want to help improve yourself for running on that terrain, you're looking at your balance work, you're looking at your ankle strength and stability stuff, standing on balance pods, those kind of things, getting your intrinsic foot and ankle strength there. That's massively going to make a difference so that when you do go on that terrain, you feel strong. And another great tip I actually got from an ultra runner who you may know, Robbie Britton. In my old job, we used to go on runs with him, obviously not as fast as him, but he used to teach us about tackling really aggressive terrain and steep declines. And he always used to tell us to kind of use our arms. If you're running on uneven terrain where you're kind of moving around those, using your arms as almost your stability for those uneven surfaces can really help. So I definitely say, yeah, think about using your arms as a way to balance, but obviously not to the point where you're like flapping your wings in the air and everything. But to a degree, that can also really help with your balance and stabilizing yourself. So give that a go.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Emma. There's so much information there for people of all levels of fitness. So we're really grateful. Where can people find you and get more information?
So I'd say my Instagram is probably where I'm most active, and it's at Emma Kirk-Odunubi. And on Tuesdays, I will do Q&As as well on trainers and things like that, and anything injury, running, sport related. So if people have questions, always worth trying to look what I'm doing on a Tuesday, because I'll put out a question box there. And then I do also have a YouTube channel which I'm updating as we speak, with videos and tips and tricks from some of the videos that I have on my Instagram. So just so there's like a link that you can be able to access and save for other times. But yeah, Instagram is the main place to find me.
Brilliant. Well, we can't wait to see you at the show soon, and thank you so much for joining us today. It's been really informative.
My pleasure. Very excited for the show too.
Brilliant. Thanks, Emma.
Bye.
Cheers.